Well, a lot of people just decide that I'm Robert.
It says a lot about a person when they change your name on your behalf. It makes me crazy.
But your name is Kate, though. You're not. Kate isn't short for anything, is it?
No, it is. Katie is my birth name, and a lot of people decide that they're going to call me Katie, even though I introduce myself as Kate, or they think they're being like cute. Every boyfriend I've ever had trouble with has called me Katie. So I'm like, well, there you go.
That's the sign.
Oh, hi. You're listening to Service from Hell, a podcast featuring people that are currently in customer service positions or the lucky ones that got out, and all of the good, bad, and infinitely irritating things that go along with that work. I'm actor and writer Kate Gaffney, and I'm uniquely qualified to discuss this as I currently work, or I used to work, at a very busy and very popular comedy club in Los Angeles. And at least one of you listening right now has probably grabbed me and told me you were ready to order when I was running around like a crazy person. So let's eat. I'd like to welcome our guest, Rob Collins. Rob Collins, Esquire, is the Miami-Dade County Education and Outreach Coordinator at Housing Opportunities Project for Excellence Incorporated, otherwise known as HOPE, a nonprofit that fights housing discrimination in Miami-Dade and Broward counties. Rob has previously spent years living in Seattle, Washington, St. Louis, Missouri, and Oak Park, Illinois, where he's from. Hello, Illinois. I know we get a lot of listeners there. Rob is a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis for undergrad and the University of Miami, better known as the U because they're very arrogant, in Miami, Florida. I better know Rob from him coaching me during a 24-hour dance marathon to raise money for kids or some shit I don't exactly remember when we were in college just a few years ago. Definitely not many, many years ago, but definitely very short amount of time ago when we were both in undergrad. Always tell the truth on this podcast. So, Rob, tell us, do you like practicing law? Do you love Florida? Do you miss coaching dance competitions? Tell us about you.
Yes, and yes.
Aw. Okay, interview over. This was a great podcast.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Rob. That was easy.
So easy.
No, so yeah, Florida's a good time. I'm from Oak Park, which is right outside of Chicago, and it is very cold there right now, and I'm grateful. I like to be active outdoors, so I very much appreciate that I can be active outdoors right now here in Miami. So that is huge. If my daughter, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and if she decides to move back north, like and my wife and I are looking to retire or whatever, we will just be visiting. We will not be moving closer because Florida is awesome. Not that Chicago isn't awesome. Chicago is quite awesome, but the weather is less awesome. So
yeah, I would not have been able to handle the winters there. What's the temperature there now, and what's the temperature in Florida? Do you know?
You know, it's crazy. I just got off the phone. We don't talk about it. I just got off the phone with my sister like a half hour ago, and we did not talk about that because there's no point. It's just rubbing it in. It's like if your team wins a game and you say, "So, how about that game, huh?" Like, so we don't talk about the weather in the winter. But people in the north will laugh at this. It is cold in Florida today, like the coldest it's been in since the spring, because it was 60 degrees this morning. And I mean, that's super cold here.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are super chilly right now. And that's just today. Yesterday it was like 75.
Do you have the heat on in your office?
No, we do not use heat. Yeah, we have an air conditioner on.
Is that a year-round situation in Florida?
Yeah, most places don't run heat. Yeah.
Wow.
Like when it gets chillier, by our standards, we'll just like sleep in sleeves and under blankets, but no one uses the heat here. No one turns on. I have never walked into an establishment here and had it be warmer when I walked in because they're doing something. Like, it might just be warmer because you're indoors, but no one runs heat. That's a waste of money.
Okay. Aren't you glad you have these hard-hitting journalistic questions? Don't you feel really intimidated by me talking about the weather? This is the most exciting podcast you've ever been on. You're welcome.
Digging deep.
Okay, I'm going for it. So we're going to go a little bit backwards. So, all right. So you were born in Oak Park, and then what got you to Seattle where you spent some time? What got you to St. Louis, and why Florida? Like, obviously you've said Florida weather is great, but give us the timeline of at what point you were like, you know what, Oak Park, Chicago, we're done. I don't want to do this anymore. What got you where you went?
So I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and they recruit heavily in Chicago. So I actually only knew about the school because they work so hard. I mean, it's a Division III school. So you don't see their sports on TV or anything. So, but they recruit heavily, and so they came to my high school and they talked, and I was like, oh, this looks cool. I want to run track. I want to do graphic design. So I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and at the end of my time there, I was like, oh, I want to see another place in the country. And then, long story short, I settled on going to Seattle, and then 3 years later, I was like, I knew then I wanted to go to law school, and then I was like, well, I want to keep seeing different parts of the country, and Miami was the part of the country I had the least experience, was in the part of the country, I should say, with which I had the least experience. So then I came down here to Miami, and in each case, when I left high school, when I left undergrad, and then when I entered law school, in each case, I felt like I really loved the place where I was, but I wanted to keep exploring. I wanted to see more. So I love Chicago. I love St. Louis. I love Seattle. But the way I talk about it is like I felt like it would be a betrayal to my upbringing and my opportunities to just stay there. Like I wanted to keep exploring. And so now I'm here, and then I hit warm weather. I'm like, fuck that betrayal shit. I'm staying, I'm staying where I am.
Exploration over.
Yeah, exactly.
And did you actually? I didn't know this about you. Did you run track in college?
I did, yeah. But I mean, it was Division 3, so
Who cares, Rob? That's awesome. Wait, were you short distance or long distance?
middle. So yeah,
Well-
neither of the. I ran the 400, which is a quarter of a mile.
Oh.
So like short distance would be sprints, like 100 or 200, and then long distance is a mile or 2 miles. So I was in between, like the 400 and the 800, a quarter mile and a half mile. Those are considered middle distances. And I threw the javelin also.
That's so random. Usually those are separate entities. Like usually
They are very different. And
Yeah.
it was fun. I'm unbelievably grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. What was your fastest 400? Or is that like asking someone how much money they make? Like, is that a rude question?
It depends. It depends on the person.
Okay.
In each case, like some people will openly tell you how much money they make, and other people will openly tell you what their track times are. My fastest 400 was 51 point something.
Holy shit.
Oh, you're too kind.
I'm not. That's
it's
crazy.
faster. It's faster than like maybe the average person walking down the street. But like really fast high schoolers are a good 6 seconds faster than that. Like if they're really, really good in high school. So then if they're really good in college, they're much faster than that.
Well, I'm Rob, folks, you're going to learn. Rob doesn't take too kindly to compliments, even though he's deserving of all of them and is a wonderfully amazing person who I've known for a long time and deeply respect. But whatever, all that aside, that's crazy fast. And I could not do that. I couldn't do that.
Well, not with that attitude.
You're right. You're right, Rob. You're right. Okay. So settled in Florida. And so now you are, and we'll get into a little bit more of this in the next section, but you work for Hope right now doing combating housing discrimination, which who knew that's just a full-time job, as if people are, discriminating against people regularly. Who knew that happens?
Imagine that.
Imagine. So what got you into, because a lot of lawyers make the choice of going into corporate law and then they get into the golden handcuffs and they work 20 of 24 hours of each day and they make a ton of money, but a lot of them are deeply unhappy. Not all of them. But what made you choose, regardless of student loan debt and all of the things that make corporate law appealing, what made you say, not for me, I want to go into helping human beings?
Well, I got extremely lucky that I attended undergrad and law school on scholarship, and I got very, very lucky, and so that was not a decision that I had to really face. And I personally know several people they were going to do public interest law, but as a direct result of having loans, they didn't. Direct result, and they'll tell you straight up. And I will never know how lucky I am that I didn't have to make that choice, because I like volunteering, I like public service, and I've been able to just roll with that and just do public service as I've wanted to, and not had to think about, am I making enough money? So like I said, I'll never know how fortunate I am not to have made that choice, because a lot of people who are far more virtuous than I am have faced that, and they say, well, I want to help, but I just can't. I can't put food on the table and do this work, and so I'm not going to do this work. Luckily, there's this loan forgiveness program where you do a certain amount of hours, a certain amount of years, I'm sorry, of public service, either government or nonprofits, and then the government repays your loan, and that's what my wife is doing. You may, for the listeners, I may call her Miss Lewis. That's my wife. Just know that's who I'm talking about. So Miss Lewis, she's a public service attorney. She has to pay law school loans, but because of this program, she is likely to not have to repay all of the loans. Like loans will be forgiven because of her public service. And that program is for her and for our family the avenue that she didn't have when she didn't get a scholarship. So I know a lot of people are taking advantage of that. And that's great. And that's government making it so that people don't have to face that decision. Like, oh, am I going to help people or am I going to be able to survive? And I'm really grateful for that program, for our family, certainly, but also just because of what that means for all of these people who are taking advantage of it. I'm sure tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the country who will do service because they can afford to. So for me, it was all luck, but I know there are programs out there that make it so that people don't have to worry about helping people versus making money.
Well, and I'm just going to brush past the fact that you work really hard and you're incredibly intelligent. So it probably wasn't all luck, but whatever. We're going to move past that. It's interesting. Whilst this is a comedy podcast, you are making my brain do backflips because I'm thinking this is part of the economic distinction cog of, someone brilliant like yourself and brilliant like Aaron, Miss Lewis, wouldn't have been afforded the opportunity to help people if not for this very new government program. And in helping people as very intelligent humans, you can extend the hand to people who are economically disadvantaged, who might then be able to find a place to live somewhere, or whatever the sort of help you provide as a lawyer, and then better their lives. Because if people like your other friends, who I'm sure are also equally intelligent and lovely humans, because they are forced to go into corporate law, then they don't get to reach the hand down and help other people who are economically disadvantaged. And therefore that cycle continues. And then their brilliance and their sort of benevolence goes into the corporate world, which already has enough of those things. Maybe not enough benevolence, but definitely has enough brilliance. And it's just an interesting way that the cogs remain the way that they are, and sort of how we are set up as a society to just keep people in the cast is what I would call it, the cast that they are in. It's just interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know how at liberty I am to interrupt you while you're talking.
Anytime you want to.
I know you're in charge, and I don't want to be asked to leave.
You will be asked to leave at some point if you don't accept one fucking compliment, but go ahead. Not yet.
But while you were talking, I mean, it really, I'm going to be honest, like, this is my day-to-day. Like, this is normal for me, and not because I'm great. It's because this is normal. Like, I wake up and I do the same job every day, and I'm very grateful to be here. But because it's my day-to-day, like, I forget about what you're saying. Like, I forget about, okay, here I am telling people about their rights and telling people what housing discrimination looks like or whatever. But then those people may turn and tell somebody else, or, those people may be helped in their situation. And honestly, I forget about that. I forget about that ripple because I come to work every day. I do my job, then I go home. Then I come back the next day, then I go home. And like, I appreciate that this conversation is helping me slow down and like smell the flowers and be like, shit, like that whoever you spoke to, my job is outreach. So I talk to people, and who knows, like one of those 10 or 35 people that I talked to today, just giving a presentation, they may not have responded to me, but who knows the ripple effects of that. So I really appreciate this conversation and helping me, take a step back and look at what I do.
Well, I think it often is helpful to have someone who is outside of it who, I mean, I have a deep appreciation for just law in general, tons of lawyers in my family, and just understanding how complex that is. And I have family members that work in very deeply disturbing, intense cases for, on the federal side. And So it is, I have been sort of bathing in it and paying attention to it because it's so fascinating to think people do work I literally could never do. I wouldn't have the energy to do the type of work that you and Miss Lewis do. Like I just, and God bless you for doing it. And so can you explain, just so that I understand, because I don't actually know what your day looks like. You say a lot of your job is outreach. So how do you use your law degree in your job, and what does a typical work week look like for you doing the type of work that you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can call her Erin, by the way.
Okay, I didn't, because I call her Erin, but I didn't know what the.
No, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'll know who you're talking about.
Okay, good.
A lot of people are in that situation where they're like, what do I call her? Because I know he calls her Miss, but no, please call her whatever you want. Oh, no, this is being recorded, though.
Taya's mom. I'm going to just call her Taya's mom, because women lose our whole identity once we have kids. So it's, I'm kidding. Right. Keep going.
That's what they say. Yeah. So I in a typical week, even since the pandemic, in a typical week, I'll work Sunday through Saturday if that happens, because I give presentations to people. So in a 7-day stretch, maybe someone has asked me to present to some home buyers or a community group, or what's another thing I've been a part of, like a parents group. In fact, I will be speaking to a parents group tonight. And so I just come on, and now during the pandemic, it's all online. I come on and I talk for 10, 15 minutes about what housing discrimination looks like, what is actually illegal, and what people can do about it. And at the end of it, people can ask me questions, whatever, and then I kind of peace out. And a lot of times, the meeting continues on. Like I piggyback on other people hosting events. They pull the people together. I parachute in, and I do a little talk, and then I'm gone. There are some times where I am the entire reason that people meet, but that's usually for a staff. Like that's usually either a nonprofit staff or housing provider staff, like a condo association, homeowners association, property manager, a group of realtors, where they have actually convened just to talk about the topic of housing discrimination. But usually it's people who are, long story short, getting together for some other reason. And then I come in and I talk, and then that's it. When I say, by the way, that I work 7 days a week, I don't mean that I work like I'm always working all the time. I mean, these events where people have these meetings can happen anytime, especially now that things are virtual. I really make myself available, and I say, hey, it's whatever. Like if your staff meets on Saturdays, or if you're having this home buyers workshop or your community event on a Sunday afternoon, I'm there. Like, please count me in. But the place where I work, our bosses are real awesome. We work 80 hours every 2 weeks, period. So if I work on a Saturday, if I work in an evening, like I take that time off during the week some other time. So when I have to make sure it's clear, like I say I can work any of the 7 days of the week, but I'm not working more than 80 hours every 2 weeks, because our bosses really take care of us, and nonprofit burnout is real. So
I literally just wrote, ask him to go deeper into nonprofit and how he transitioned into that. We're going to get in that in a second, because I do want to talk about the burnout from that. So I just want to go back to the procedural part of your job. So who is the someone that you reference that approaches you to be part of fill in the blank meeting, or be the presentation on, housing discrimination to a parents group? Like, how do these people find out about you? And who are these people that know to approach you as the outreach coordinator? And how are they made aware of HOPE?
Good question. Yeah, like the majority of our presentations are to community partners that we already have in place. So there are nonprofits here in Miami, well, around the country, maybe around the world, but at least around the country, that do housing stuff. And so they'll serve clients with housing counseling and credit, and helping people be educated about title and inspection and all these other things. And a lot of them, I was going to say, one of the things they usually want to touch on is discrimination when it happens. But a lot of them get grants from the government, from HUD, usually from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, but also maybe from their state government or local government. And a lot of that money actually, incidentally, comes from HUD anyway. But they get grants, a lot of these nonprofits, to operate. And in getting the grants, they say, oh, when we do our work, we'll cover housing discrimination, and we'll even bring in a lawyer who works in that field. So it's a symbiosis. Like if it weren't for them, I wouldn't have an audience most of the time. But if it weren't for me, that's one less thing, one fewer thing, I suppose. One fewer thing they'd be able to put in their grant application. Like, oh, so what are you going to cover? Like when they're applying for the money and HUD asks them, what are you going to cover in these classes that you want to have? Housing discrimination and fair housing is one more thing that they can say that they'll cover. And then they say, hey, Rob, can you cover it? And then they, so it's a symbiosis, but I think they I need them way more than they need me because even in my absence, they could talk about the Fair Housing Act, but it makes them look good, just being real. Like it makes them look good to bring in an outside entity that only works in fair housing all day, every day. And sorry, I realized I didn't answer one of your earlier questions about what how does being a lawyer come into play. And the truth is, the having a bar license is not necessary for my position. But in fact, I actually had this job before I was a lawyer. I had this exact same position, but I just love it so much. But like when I'm talking, two things. One, people will ask questions that I really only know because I went to law school. What are damages? What's the statute of limitations? Like these like technical questions that I actually only know because I'm a lawyer. But on a more basic level, and this is interesting, people can't see me because this is a podcast, but I am a black guy, and when I
What?
shave,
Wait, what? Get out. Just kidding.
when I shave, I look young,
You do.
and people see a young, obviously before the pandemic, people see a young black person, and this is just real talk. They'll say, whatever, whatever. Oh, that's nice. I'm sure that's nice. But then when they hear I'm a lawyer, I can say the exact same stuff, and they are all ears all of a sudden. And it's not non-black people. It's all people have and it's real. And I'm not just saying, oh, I'm a young black man, I'm a victim. Like I'm not just saying that. People come up to me at events and they'll say, oh, you're a lawyer? You don't look like a lawyer. And it's only recently that someone else told me, you should say, what does a lawyer look like? And so then I started doing that. And obviously this is all pre-pandemic when we were face to face. And I said, oh, what does a lawyer look like? And then it's funny, different people have different reactions. But some of them, they catch themselves and you can tell they feel a little embarrassed that they said, I don't look like a lawyer. And they'll just say something kind of to get it to go away, to make it look like they didn't ask that question in the first place. They'll be like, oh, like an old white guy, huh? Try to like laugh it off or something. But it's funny. It's funny because they're poking holes at that stereotype, not realizing that, a good 20 seconds earlier, they were completely operating under that stereotype.
Come on.
So it's an interesting thing. And I am not in the business of embarrassing people but they should know that when they come up to me and say something like that, that's gonna, hey, what are you trying to say? And so they should be a little more cognizant, not only of how they come across, but of what they think. Because before they said that to me, they thought it.
No
which
question.
is that's the real nugget. Like you carry yourself however you carry yourself, but what you need to do is really check yourself about your own prejudices on the inside. And I will, before I know I'm just talking a bunch, but before I hand it back over to you, I want to say I am extremely prejudiced. And I am extremely racist because all of us are.
Because we all are.
And as someone who works in a place that fights discrimination, I can openly say, and all people should be able to say this about themselves, that they have prejudices. I fight discrimination every day. I am super prejudiced. I completely size up situations without really knowing anything. We all do, and I think too many people are afraid to say that. So then, as a result, too many people are not even in a place where they can work on it.
There's a million nuggets in that are fantastic that I don't even know which one to dissect first. How pervasive actually is housing discrimination? Because I think it's something that, much.
Sorry, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It is life for some people. Like,
what does that mean?
If you, it's one of those things where, like, if somebody says how big a deal is, and I'm not like mocking your question. I'm just saying if somebody says how big a deal or how big is our fraternities in college, like if you're in a fraternity and that's what you make your life, then it's going to be enormous. So some people want to think that housing discrimination is not a big deal and it doesn't happen. But that's a very people will say that from a position of privilege, because the truth is, depending on the situation, it may be, when I say it's life for people, I mean like some people are facing it nonstop, and then other people are perpetrating it nonstop. Like some people will run their apartment building or their condo or whatever with discrimination at the forefront. Kind of the same way, and sadly, like maybe somebody brings a new romantic partner home and they know, oh gosh, my parents are going to say XYZ about this person just because of their demographics. Some places are run like that. Some housing places are run like that. So it's not it's not pervasive in the sense like that there's no hope or whatever, but it's definitely pervasive in that there are places where it is has been the way it is, and despite the laws, it just continues to be that way. And like people with mental or physical challenges can assume. So now that I was just talking about the people who do the discrimination, the people who face the discrimination, I mean, it's if you're on Section 8, if you have kids, there are laws in certain places that say that you can't do that. At the national level, it's illegal to discriminate against people for having a mental or physical challenge. But regardless of that, regardless of that illegality, people are, if you have a mental or physical challenge, you can assume that half of the places that you would look at are going to treat you differently because of that. So, like, if you find 10 places that you like, you can assume off the bat that 5 of them will treat you differently. And then some will say, no, you can't live here. Some will just charge you more. And you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you do testing, which is what we do as an organization, like these investigations where we send out people who pretend like they want to live somewhere. But you can assume, just imagine, like, you're looking at you found 4 places. You can cross 2 of them off your list because of how you'll be treated. Like it's unbelievable. So to answer your question about pervasive, like it is super pervasive. It is, unfortunately.
I want to go a little deeper. So if you're comfortable telling the story, I don't know if you're able to identify who the person was, but you told me a story on the phone of sending someone into like you had a building that had been accused of discrimination, and a genuine person that really did want to rent, who raised this to your attention, had stated, I believe that I'm being discriminated against because when I called, they said that there were apartments available. When I arrived, there weren't. And it sort of seems, like someone would script this in a movie. And I don't think that people actually understand that this is happening today. And so if you could you paint that story of, you don't have to say who, if that is something to protect with your organization, but the person that you then sent, who is a Caucasian female, got a different answer. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. So the way that we do our investigations, and it's not unique to us, this is industry wide. We send out, essentially, so people can wrap their head around it, like we send out like secret shoppers, people who pretend like they want to live somewhere, and we see, and they'll be of different demographics. Some of them will be white people, some will be women, some will say they have kids, whatever it is we're looking for, and we send these people with the same rental history. I mean, depending on what it is we're looking for, but we'll send people with the same rental history, the same debt to income ratio, the same income, maybe even the same job, same credit score. It depends on what we're looking for and how we're doing it. But just to paint the picture, we'll send people and we tell them what to say, so that the only difference between them is that one thing that we are investigating. So we send people who are of the same race.
Sorry, Rob, let me just stop you. So
Sure.
what is that one, when you say to investigate that one thing?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So every investigation we do, thank you for breaking it down for clarity. Yeah. The investigations will be centered on race. The one thing may be race. The one thing may be gender. The one thing may be whether or not you have children. These things, these illegal criteria for treating somebody different, they are called protected classes. And so there are a bunch of protected classes. At the federal level, there are 7: race, color, national origin, religion, having children, your mental or physical challenge, and race, color, national origin, religion, gender, mental or physical challenge. I don't know. Is that all? No, that's stuff. Anyway, whatever. Those are the 7. Yeah, race, color, national origin, religion, gender, mental or physical challenge, and having children. Those are the seven at the federal level. So we will investigate along those lines. Well, sorry. So those are the federal ones. They cover you anywhere you are in the country. But then different localities, states, cities, counties, have made more. You might have heard that. Oh, that sounds like a pretty limited list. Those are just the federal ones. At a more local level, you may also be protected because of your sexual orientation, your age, your marital status. There's a number of things. So we will investigate and we'll say, oh, okay, we want to see, are women being kept out here? So in a test, the one thing in that test would be gender. So we'll send people of similar demographics, but the one thing different among the people we send is that we are sending half women and half men because we want to see, what's happening. Is there something happening to all the women and something happening to all the men? In a different case, we might be testing for race. The one thing might be race. So we'll send people with different demographics, but we want to make sure we're sending half Hispanic, half Asian, or maybe it's whether or not you have kids. So the people are a variety of people, but we want to make sure we're sending half with kids and half without, so that we can show a pattern. Because when we bring our cases and we think discrimination is happening, the party being accused of discrimination almost invariably says, oh, it didn't happen, or, oh, it was a misunderstanding, you misconstrued what I was saying to you. So then we have to establish a pattern of, okay, you're saying it was a misunderstanding, fine, but that misunderstanding, quote unquote, is only happening when it's a woman, or it's only happening when it's a gay person. Then there's this misunderstanding. So we can establish that pattern, like whatever you want to call it, discrimination, misunderstanding, never really happened. There's only an issue at all when it's this person of this demographic. And so we can establish this pattern for a judge or a jury. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. We're going to show that a judge or jury that what you're calling a misunderstanding is only happening when the person is black.
Can you, just from a legal thing, because I think this is fascinating, what is the actual definition of establishing a pattern? How many have to happen to be a pattern?
Great question.
Thanks, Rob. It's not my first time.
The answer is it's up to the judge or jury.
Get out of here. I didn't know that.
That is the real answer, because there may be a situation where only 7 people went, but they really went, like in real life, like not a test, not an investigation like us, just 7 people who went. They don't have to have 3 more people go so that there's 10 of them. They can just say, hey, we went, and then our friends went, and we got totally different answers from each other about what's available or how much it costs or when we can move in. And the only difference between us is they told the Jewish people this and they told everybody else this. So there is no magic number, because the circumstances may present themselves however they're going to present themselves. And so the law doesn't draw a line, because that wouldn't be fair to the people who come to the table with a real case. Oh, now you arbitrarily have to have brought there has to be 10 of you. So the law doesn't make it so there's a magic number. It's just whether the judge or jury is convinced, yeah, you're right, this is happening certainly along these lines. Sorry, just a second.
No, it's okay. I'm jumping in because these are notes I should have given up top as programming, but as my audience is used to, I forget to do these programming notes and then I add them in later. Rob is working in real time from his office in Miami-Dade County, doing the job that he is currently describing that is constant. And as you can tell from the phone ringing, we're being very authentic. And he is actually in Florida. I am in Ohio. This is via Zoom. It sounds like it's via Zoom. You folks have been very patient with me with this time and history that we are in. And you've been patient with the podcast with the sound issues and whatnot. So the phone may continue to ring because turns out, to prove Rob's point, housing discrimination is pervasive. So the phone may ring. I want to go really quickly and then I promise we'll move on. I just find your job so fascinating. How often do these things actually go to trial? Because you mentioned judges and juries. So how often are you actually in the courtroom, or does this actually see the light of day, or do most places settle?
Great question. Yeah, sorry, it's my habit to say great question.
Are you kidding? My ego is loving it. Go ahead, Rob.
Your questions are great. I don't mean to be annoying by repeating that.
No, it's not annoying at all.
I would say we as an organization, so there's 8 of us. in the whole organization, we probably bring an average, really an average of a complaint or a lawsuit. So a complaint would be like an administrative complaint. This is inside baseball kind of talk. We might make an administrative complaint to HUD, which is, as far as people need to know, it's the same as a lawsuit. We are telling the government, either a court or the executive branch, we're telling somebody that discrimination is happening and that the government needs to intervene. We bring a complaint or a lawsuit probably on average once a month, because
shit.
a lot of the people who call us, it doesn't get to a lawsuit. A lot of the people will call us, and we get. The phone rings. The phone rings here 20 times a day. 20 times, yeah, average 20, and maybe average 25. So it's ringing all day. But a lot of the people who call us, they'll say, "Hey, I'm facing discrimination," and then we look into it, and they are facing discrimination. We bring it to the attention of that entity that's doing the discrimination. We say, "Hey, you can't do that," because our goal here is that people can live where they want within the law, where they qualify for it. Now, if you can't afford to pay for it, that's not illegal for them to say no. But if you're being kept out because of your demographics, that's something else. So we want people to not have to worry about their demographics. That doesn't mean we want to file a bunch of lawsuits. That's actually, filing a lawsuit stands in the way of that, because now it's an even longer process. So we'll call that place and we'll say, "Hey, no bullshit. Like, you stop doing what you're doing. You're being watched." And they'll say, "Oh, sorry about that. Oh, it was a misunderstanding." And then they push the paperwork through or whatever. So a lot of the majority, in fact, the vast majority of our calls don't result in lawsuits. That's one reason, is because even if there is a problem, the person doing the discriminating never, they going to a lawsuit is their last straw. They don't want that. They don't want press out that they are being sued. So actually, another part of, we've been around since 1988, and in 32 years, we've actually never gone to trial once. And for the benefit of people who may not know, trial is, objection and witnesses and in front of the judge like that. All of our cases, and we've gotten over $12 million in settlements. It's all, not me, but my colleagues and my predecessors, the cases settle. All 12 million of those dollars are from settlements, and it's along the same line of thinking. We bring the case, they say, "You didn't do it," and then as a result of those investigations that I was just talking about, "Well, you say you didn't do it, but here's who we sent, here's who they talked to, here's the date and time, here's what was said to them," and then in the face of that evidence, because we don't bring our lawsuits for nothing, in the face of that evidence, they say, "Okay, maybe we did it," and then they settle the case, because they don't want the press. They don't want to just throw money at lawyers on their side who, when they know they're just going to lose, because we have the evidence. So most of the time, every time, we settle. But a lot of times, a lot of the callers that come with real complaints, it is handled completely outside of court before we ever even file a lawsuit, because that other entity doesn't want to get in trouble. At very least, they don't want to be caught. And then beyond that, they definitely don't want to go to a court trial or anything like this. So they don't want to be in that position. So trial, to answer your question the way you asked it, maybe once a month on average. Some months more, some months we don't file anything. But that is not because it's not happening. It's because the people don't want to go to court.
They got. So they're like, "Oops, sorry."
Yeah.
Okay, I want to just go a little bit. So you and I have discussed on the phone. I'm making up this phrase. Rob has not said this. I'm saying this. Discrimination by neglect, essentially. So say these people fight to get into this, development or this apartment building or whatever, and the manager, with his or her own issues and prejudices or whatever, is made aware of the fact that this family pushed to get there, and maybe they have a physical limitation that required a ramp to be added to the apartment building or whatever. There was something that the management had to change, and they want to push this family out. How often do you have things brought to your attention that are, "Look, I'm still paying the rent and I'm still allowed to live here, but I've had a leaky sink for 6 months and I now have mold in the bathroom that I've had for 2 months, and they keep saying they're going to get to it. They're going to get to it." How often does stuff like that happen?
Oh, that's probably half of the call, like the total calls we get. most of them are like half of them are like that, where the person will say like it's actually not because of who I am, it's not my demographics, it's just that this is a shitty landlord. This is it's so much fun being able to swear. Usually when I do these interviews for work, there's no way I would swear.
Go
I would be
fucking
working
crazy, Rob. Lose your fucking mind. Let's
yeah,
go.
that's right. So these motherfucking landlords. No, just kidding. So these landlords, they, I mean, it happens. It happens all the time, and we have some community partners that we work with who are more landlord tenant lawyers. So we are discrimination. They'll be more landlord tenant, and so it doesn't. Their work doesn't really matter the demographics of the parties involved. Where our work, that's what it hinges on. And so they'll throw work to us when it's discrimination. Like it is actually completely hinges on the demographics of the people. They throw that to us. When it's just a landlord being a bad landlord, we throw that to them. But those two things can it can intersect if a landlord, and this happens, where a landlord is choosing to repair some people's stuff and not other people's. And they choose, I'm not going to fix the black people's stuff, or I'm going to take longer to deal with the Hispanic people's stuff. That is discrimination. And I'm glad we're talking about this topic, because discrimination doesn't just mean you were told no, you can't move in. It could be you were charged more, or you get your services differently, or you were told to live in a certain neighborhood, or even just a certain part of the complex because you have kids, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just any treatment because of what I called earlier the protected classes. Any treatment, no matter how it plays out, maybe even they just aren't giving certain people their security deposits back. Just because they were told you could move in doesn't mean that anything goes at that point. And the one way that it really plays out, to really spell it out, is sexual harassment, where you're allowed to move in and you get your services, but it comes with a lot of comments about you. Just to talk real, usually it's male landlords and female tenants. I mean, that it could happen in any direction, but that's usually how we see it mostly, and that is gender discrimination. Because the whole idea of discrimination is, would you get treated the same way if you were a different person? So if your landlord is just a slumlord and they couldn't care less what color you are, then that's just a slum. That's not discrimination. They are just a bad landlord, and maybe they're not doing their job. Depending on the severity of the situation, it could be illegal, but not discriminatory. They don't care who you are. They're just a bad landlord. But sexual harassment is different. So there you have it. So that's how it plays out. It depends on the situation. It's very, as with most things in law, it's very situation specific. But
Yeah, and that's not, I mean, even the sexual harassment piece is not something I would have thought of. Now, I'm going to be devil's advocate. So I'm a landlord, and I have had, say, the last 3 people I rented to all had kids. And then for the next year, I was constantly dealing with other tenants complaining the kids are running around all the time. They're loud at all hours. They're, up at 5 a.m, and we have to hear them all the time. It's interrupting my quality of life. And the landlord, who also owns the building, say the manager, the owner, same person, says, you know what, I can't, the headache that this has created for me. And say the landlord, went to the families and said, listen, we have to be reasonable. There have to be quiet hours. You're in violation of those. And say that landlord documents everything and has shown a pattern of having an issue with families with children. Would you, as because you would be dealing with the discrimination side of things, and he or she is not necessarily a slumlord, but has established a pattern of, I just don't want to deal with this headache. Is it within the rights of the owner / manager of the building to say, this has created an untenable environment, therefore I don't want to rent to families anymore? Or is it a too bad, so sad, if families want to rent, you still have to rent to them?
I mean, the answer is too bad, so sad. But
Okay.
that position is sympathetic. You can, and it's very logical. And I'm glad. I appreciate the way you laid that out. It's extremely logical. It's extremely logical how you come to feel that way. And this goes for everything. If you've been mugged and been mugged 5 times and it always looked like the same kind of person, whenever you see that kind of person, you cannot help but associate it. So it's a very natural and understandable and sympathetic position. But the problem with it is that you end up penalizing future people for what other people have done just because they look the same, or and that ends up just not being fair. And then, but really, at the end of the day, regardless of whether you think it's fair or not, like we tell housing providers all the time, regardless of whether you think it's fair or whatever, it's the law. I mean, that makes our answer very simple. Like, it's just the law. And so while it's understandable that you're in that situation, it's just the law. And so the solution, so a landlord says, well, then I'm just asked out. Like, what can I do then? The answer is if you have problems, like using that example, if you have a problem with noise, instead of making your rules in your building, which you are certainly free to make and free to enforce, instead of making your rules about you have to make your rules about the people, about the problem itself, and not the people that you associate with that problem. So if the problem is noise, make your rule about noise. Don't make your rule about who you associate with noise. And that's, like I said, that association, I mean, it's prejudice, but it's understandable. It comes from experience. So we're not hating on that. Like, we're not going to pretend like you have to become this robot who doesn't see color, doesn't see whether someone has kids. Like, that's not realistic. But if the problem is, like, you just ask somebody, you just talk it out with that landlord in your example. You talk it out. Say, well, what is the problem with kids? They say, well, they're noisy, they write on the walls, they break things. Then you make your rules about noise, vandalism, and breaking shit. Make your rules about that, and then you can do your job. You can get what you need to get. I don't want noise, I don't want vandalism, I don't want stuff getting broken. But then the other side gets what they get, which is freedom and not being held accountable for what happened because of somebody else who looks like them. And then this isn't even getting, and I really appreciate this example because a lot of these rules are really based on prejudice from, like, just the media, like life, like, not even real experience, just things they've heard about or read about in books that, this kind of person is loud, this is a real example of what a person could really have dealt with real people, not just their assumptions, real people, and then they're just making a link. I think that person is a lot more sympathetic than someone who just gets their prejudice because they just, oh yeah, I grew up without this X people in my life and I have just heard enough and I just don't want to have to deal with that. Like, it's harder to sympathize with that because you're not even trying. But if you've really, in this example, if you've really dealt with it, yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Well, and that's kind of why I brought it up, because I think that I think it's very easy in our own lives to say a blanket statement like discrimination is terrible, racism is terrible. Like, of course, yeah. But I think that there is some nuance in a conversation that we should all be having with ourselves where, I mean, you opened with, I'm racist, I have prejudice, as we all do. And I think it's very easy to sit in an ivory tower and think, well, I'm not that though. I'm not. I'm so woke. I'm so liberal. I'm so fill in the blank. Yeah. That I think that undermines the work that can actually get done if we all sit in our own bodies and our own minds and think, where are ways or where are examples where I myself have acted out of this prejudice or, racism, or where have I benefited from, the privilege of having the color of skin I have or the gender I have or the sexual orientation I have, and where have I overlooked places where that hasn't existed? And sure, that's asking someone to do a deep dive, but I wanted to bring up this example because there are nuances where we really have to look at how can I let my lived experience inform change. And I think you said it perfectly where you said, make the rule be about the problem, not the person. If noise is the issue, it's not all parents that are going to rent from you in the future are going to create an untenable environment. It is, you haven't done a good enough job articulating the boundaries for your building around noise, and you haven't done a good enough job, documenting those, making sure there's a paper trail, and therefore going through the process. And to your point, you're allowed to be frustrated at, children being loud all night, and you're allowed to be frustrated that your other tenants are constantly bringing it up. Of course, that is frustrating. But I also think as humans, we need to look at accepting what is on our side of the street. It's like, you chose to own a building though, and the
That's
massive
right. Oh my
benefits
God.
that
You
you
don't know how often we have to tell people that when they say, it's my property, why can't I do this and that? And first, the answer, there's two answers. One, first of all, we tried that. And we tried letting people do what they want to do. And there were still crises of discrimination for various reasons. So we tried that and it didn't work. Sorry. And the other answer is, that's the cost of doing business. Just like you
yes.
said, nobody's making you own a building.
Correct.
You want to own a building? There are rules that come with doing that.
Right.
Sorry. That's the cost of doing business.
It's also profiling people that come into a store and saying, well, only people that look this particular way steal from me. And it's like, no, those happen to be the people that you may have caught. But P.S., if you're going to go after everybody that potentially steals from you, shut your business, because you're going to be stolen from regardless of the demo. I mean, yes, I guess there's a propensity for more, whatever. The cost of doing business piece, I think we as human beings have a really difficult time. I'll speak for myself. I have a hard time being an acceptance of the yin and the yang piece. I want it all to be just absolutes of good, and things are always fair and always even. And I don't want to deal with the reality of human beings interacting with one another, which is complicated and nuanced and gray. And I think that that's a difficulty with housing discrimination, because I think a lot of people hear that, myself included, and think, oh, you are a person of color, therefore I am not renting to you. And I hope people understand, if only it were that simple, that would be way easier to prosecute. That would be way easier to go after and just say, yeah, this is tangible, very real evidence. But when it's smaller sort of offshoot things of sexual harassment or, discrimination by neglect, or little pieces where it's like, oh no, this is a far more complex issue than you, person of color, cannot rent this apartment. So anyway, enough soapboxing. I just love what you do, and I think it's very fascinating. So folks, we hope you enjoyed your apps. That was all apps. You got to know a lot of things. This is probably going to be a 2-part episode because Rob is very interesting. Let that compliment slide. Don't negate it. We're going on to the entrees after a quick break. Rob doesn't get to negate it.